I suck, asshole.
Me too. I suck many assholes.
Yeah. So, anyways, Josiah. So the other day I was thinking I wanted to build a world because I want to write a short story, right? A
Right.
light novel, and I wanted to
Yeah.
abandon that idea I built a couple days ago. I was thinking more along the lines of, there's this world, and it was like advanced beyond advanced, where
Right.
when it comes to war, one person controls a fleet, like, but from the side from a computer, right?
Wait. What exactly do you mean by a fleet? Are you talking
Like
about like robots?
like one person like mentally hooked in, controls an entire
Oh,
by
okay. So they
themselves,
have the ability. They have
like
the
Ender's
ability to
Game style,
control a fleet.
like Ender's
Yeah.
Game
Yeah. Yeah.
style, but one person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they do
So
that, but then I wanted to do like a technological collapse, kind of like the data, like for example, like we learned like in bioinformatics class that the Pareto's law and Moore's law is something about how data is outstripping like the data storage abilities,
hmm
right? I want to be like, oh, we've produced so much data that we've literally run out of data storage, and the whole entire like technological economy just collapsed, entering like a technological apocalypse where data storage and like bytes are the new currency, where like you pay to have stuff like that.
okay, that's interesting. Um. Okay. I had one question that was kind of circulating in my mind through that whole thing. So you kind of wanted to go through a dystopian sort of idea, right?
No, not dystopian.
Not dystopian.
Like at the beginning, it's just war. Like how regular people are, just like there's war. You know how real life is. People like to kill each other, shit
Right.
like that. Space battles, whatever.
So, what type of society are we talking about here? Are we talking about a society where it's extremely advanced, or is it like more or less a bit into our future, let's say, where we have a
No,
couple of
well,
things that we're dreaming of
so
now?
so the original like starting state of the world is kind of like hyper advanced, like intergalactic stuff, you know.
Hmm.
And then after the technological collapse, with the inability to maintain all the data, humanity recedes back into the atomic age, but with knowledge
Into
on the atomic
so
age.
into our age, essentially.
Yes, our
Interesting.
age, but with the knowledge of the future, because like they've had it before, they can emulate it, but with our current energy sources.
Would there be? I'm guessing that since they have had access to this technology, are there still classes of people in this world that you're describing that have access to that technology, but it's very limited?
Limited, yeah.
So my guess is that one of the power disparities would be the access to technology that is in the world.
Yeah.
Would I be correct
And
in that
all,
in that idea?
yeah, and their access to technology is directly linked to the amount of bytes or megabytes that they have, because that's a new form of currency.
Right.
Yeah.
Could you actually okay, so I'm taking the shape of this idea into my mind, and it sounds really interesting, like this whole concept that you can have. I'm guessing it's like a constant war of things, hyper advanced, and then it comes back to us around like where they're using gasoline and shit.
Not
And
gasoline. They're using like fusion power.
oh, okay,
Like
but
imagine a hyper elite, like a hyper advanced like society where they learned how to contain fusion within a small cell. Like
right.
obviously they wouldn't use something like that in the future, right?
Hmm.
But then they know they have the knowledge to do it. So it's kind of like our world plus one.
Yeah, but what I mean is like when I say gas, I'm talking about the majority here. So from what it sounds like, uh, a lot of okay. Let me put it like this: a lot of dystopian stories and a lot of dystopian worlds that people build.
I never once said it was dystopian though.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the way it sounded like when you say apocalyptic or post fall sort of thing,
I,
usually
I
that
said tech
infers a
I said
dystopian.
techno I said technological apocalypse. Society's still fine.
Like,
It's just the
oh, okay.
currency. and the people receded back technology wise, but culture is still there.
Wouldn't that have huge effects on the actual society though?
Yeah, but it wouldn't. But in my world state, they don't descend into chaos.
So the elites, I guess, managed to hold on to power.
The elites, like I said, if you're rich, you have more data space. You have more data space. You have more access to, like, to the old world technology, which is high tech.
Access to old world technology. So in this case, information is literally power.
Yes.
Okay.
Or
Or
information
rather,
data space.
The ability to store information, which infers the ability to hold technologically advanced ideas, is associated with economy, which is associated with power.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So
Okay.
now, describe to me. I'm assuming this happens in a place, right? So we've described the base constraints of what the society is going through in this situation and in this world that you want to build. So where is this happening? What is the setting? That's
What's the
important
setting?
to world building. Yeah.
Hmm.
You mentioned that it was an intergalactic society, right?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like I was thinking, like, it went from being intergalactic to, because they did have their, like, technology shut off, even though they do have, like, the nuclear fusion containing cell capsules. They no longer have access to, like, high speed space travel that would, like, bring them to one destination to the other. So they go from intergalactic, like, colonies to isolated places. So each planet is, like, has their own. It's like imagine if all the continents on Earth had a wall around them.
Yeah. That's
Like,
okay.
they can't access each other, but they're there.
Yeah, I'm really excited now. Actually, can they communicate with each other?
They could communicate with each other, right? But there's not really a point to it except for relaying ideas or trying to, the only reason why they communicate with each other is just to, like, try to solve the problem of data
Right.
space, right? Meanwhile, what's happening is that on these individual planets, or some of them, there are civil wars.
Right. Yep. That's. See, when I was thinking about the societal changes that would occur because of this huge apocalypse of data, right?
Yeah.
What I was inferring was that since this data, I'm assuming this technology is what upheld the social order, right? There
Yeah.
would be a lot of things. Its fundamental collapse would lead to a collapse of the societies, right? Especially now when we're talking about an intergalactic empire. If its very lines of communication and supply were to be cut off, that means that all the planets become, like, instantaneously independent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there would be civil wars all over the place to try and figure out who picks up the pieces.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
then
this is exciting.
So these planets, they have their civil wars, right? And like I said, keep it in mind, this is not dystopian. It's not like a government rules all. It's kind of like real life. There are rich people, there are poor people, and there are soldiers that go to war over stuff like land, over stuff like money.
Right.
Basics. Like, it happens, right? So the veterans that used to pilot these fleets are actually forced out of their comfort zone behind their computers and into a cockpit of, like, machines.
Okay.
Because
but before, these people were the ones that were. These are the people you mentioned that had one person with a mind link that was able to control a vast majority of, like, AI fleets, or not AI, but
because for one person to be able to control fleets, right? Like,
right.
you have to have immense, like, mental capacity or, like, abilities, right?
Right.
So when it comes to these, like, and because they have no use for intergalactic fleet control, like, when it comes to civil wars, they get what was it? What was the thing with drafted? They get drafted into
Are they drafted, or do they become mercenaries and they hire themselves out?
Some are mercenaries, some get drafted.
Right.
Right? And
Okay.
Instead, they personally now they have a personal stakes in it. Now they have, because like if they fuck up, they die, right? They pilot mechs or machines or mechs or like something.
Hmm.
Something
Oh,
like
we're going.
old world tech, like some of them like use actual like interesting like expert like nice stuff, and some of them use like junk bots.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. So we're building a picture of the types of characters that this universe would hold. I'm guessing that these veteran fleet people would not be the only people that are interested in this. I'm guessing things like space pirates would start to emerge from this, and like different sectarian or religious people on these different planets, because as this is happening, like the cultures of these planets are probably diverging, right?
yeah.
Which leads me to a good question that I think is important to this. What is the timeline? When did this great catastrophe occur relative to where we are situated?
Okay, well, there has to be time to evolve. So if we put 0 as like the starting, if we set the value 0 to like when people were like humanity peaked, right?
Mm.
And then we set the value of 10 to the collapse, then I would say that this whole entire societal reformation, while still civil war, it shouldn't be too far or too close. So I would say I would put that at like a 50.
50 years, or 40
No,
years after the
not
collapse.
50. I'm using numbers as an abstract value to like estimate like temporal space.
Okay,
For example, if 0 is peak humanity form and
right,
10 is the collapse, then 50 would be the thing. Like if you use that scale, then you'll understand that like, you know, the longer they lived, it would make sense, because the longer they lived in their peak form, the longer they would take to reform into a society, right? If they took too if it occurred too far after the collapse, then there would be no reason to have a civil war, because everything would have already sorted out.
right. See, I'm what's the word? I'm having difficulty understanding exactly how this scale works, because this scale could be, if you were to try and translate it into like something measurable, it gets a bit strange, because it could be any measurement. You know what I mean?
Okay, think of it like this: it is the year 3100 or some shit. That's peak humanity, right?
Right.
So, and then 3300 is when the collapse. They lived 2 centuries like that, all happy and
Right.
like colony everything, right?
Right.
So then 3000 like 3600 or 3700 would be like after would be like the space after the collapse, where they're still like trying to figure shit out, trying to like
Right.
they're having civil wars. They've gone past the initial shock where everyone's working together, and then but they're still not to the point where everyone's settled down.
I would argue that probably the initial shock would lead these planets to have the civil wars, and then after that they would settle. Or rather, maybe if they, or some would settle, right, and then others would just devolve into like continuous factionalism or tribalism, right?
Yeah,
So,
that makes
okay,
sense. Okay, so
3,600 to 700. Uh, sorry, what were you saying?
so let's just say 3100 is the peak form,
Right,
3300 is collapse, and then
right,
3400 is like the Civil War period, and 3700 is like everything settled down, but there's still like factions and stuff.
okay, fair enough. I'm guessing that on some planets, like where there was a civil war initially, some of them would probably fraction fracture into like a system that we have, kind of like what we have today with like nation states. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Where there would be different countries vying for the resources, etc., that the
yeah,
planet holds,
yeah,
especially if they're scarce.
yeah.
Okay, so we have a very good idea right now, I think, of exactly what your world is. There's more or less on some of these planets. There's constant wars going on. It's not dystopian necessarily, but it's about this great collapse that has happened with the technological era that has prevented all these planets from being united as one thing. It's the collapse of an empire.
Like, think of it like the Great Depression, but with, think of it like the Great Depression. People who have money are well off. They're fine, whatever, and still have access to real world, like peak world technology. People
Mhm.
without it are forced to either fight in a war, or just shamble around trying to make do with what they can.
Right.
And
So people
like, I
without
wanted
money.
to touch on like how the rich people live. For example, like they have access to clean air, clean living spaces, so very clinical white cubicles, and coffins for like beds.
Right.
Um,
Oh, not coffins, but like biopods
like
or whatever.
yeah, pods. Everything is like white. Like, imagine if Apple made everything all sleek,
Yeah.
and like they have like air conditioning and recycled air, because they don't breathe outside air. They just breathe recycled clean air, right?
Right.
Like, if you ever read The Machine Stops by Forrester, then you'll understand what I'm talking about, with like automated rooms and clean everything, and everything's like sterile.
I
You
think I
know,
have an idea of what you're thinking of from the various. Well, first, like Hunger Game would probably be a good example of it, and then some episodes of Black Mirror had some good examples of what I think you're talking about.
yeah. And then when it comes down to like the middle class, that's like when you have people, they live in like apartments, right? Or like they move around hotel to hotel, right? Or motel to
Right.
motel, right? And they're just like working their working their wage slave lives, trying to get those bits and bytes to try to like try to get access to older to better technology, or access the luxuries of life through like older technology.
Oh yeah, that's a good question actually. So, actually, wait, before I go down that rabbit hole, because I think that will lead to a very different discussion that than I want to promote in this instance. You're describing a very particular set of structures and ideas which frame the reality for a set of people, specifically rich people, middle class, and poor class, right?
Yeah.
But you've also said that there are a variety of different planets, right? That
Yeah. Oh
that
no,
are
I'm focusing on one planet right now.
yes, that's what I was about to ask. Like, we're focusing on the culture and specific traditions and structures that are available to this one planet.
I'll
And
get to I'll get to the other planets in a while, in a bit.
yeah, so I wanted to know, first of all, in which period are we living? Is this story living? And also, which planet is this? Right, where are we?
I don't exactly have a name for it. I usually figure out names at the last minute.
Fair enough.
But like, I tend to give places, more. I tend to use very sterile names like AM180,
Hmm.
like digits, codes. I feel like it's a lot easier to identify,
How about we
especially
use
when.
what AM180 as a placeholder, right?
Yeah.
For this planet, and then how about this? We try and figure out a name that the locals would call it, because
Yeah, of course.
the,
I mean,
the
like,
galactic.
if you
Sorry, go ahead.
if you're spread out throughout the galaxy, you're gonna need classifications to understand which quadrant you're in. So
Right.
like throughout the galaxy, there is like there's like the AM quadrant, the ES quadrant, the
Hmm.
the the NT quadrant. Like, they have to give just saying the kind of like the scientific description of your planet should give people an idea of where you're located. Because
Right.
we're thinking of a geographical map that's not just Earth, but like a galaxy. You have to be able to. I can't. It's like saying coordinates.
My guess is that there are going to be people who live outside of this system, or who go back to like basics, so to speak.
Yeah, well,
Or
of course. That's why earlier I was talking about villages.
yeah.
There's
So
gonna be people who just feel like they don't need technology anymore. You know, because
yeah.
this
So
brings me back to this brings me back to like The Machine Stops by Forrester. The idea that once technology ends, people will revert back to a primal stage. And this is exactly what I'm trying to get at. Because once technology is stripped from them, they go back to the warring periods. Whereas some people which is also in the machine stops, believe that going away from technology and reverting back to the old lifestyle is the way to live.
Right. I'm guessing that these people would be like the poorest of the poor, kind of.
Poorest of the poor, but can you really call them unhappy? I mean, they make their own produce. They don't have high-tech technology, but they can sustain.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, okay. The connotation of poor in our society is unhappy, but being poor and being unhappy are not necessarily one and the same.
And poor by whose standards? By the current mainstream currency? Yeah, maybe.
True.
Right?
You know,
Like
actually, it's interesting. This debate, this idea of the implications of technology on our society, and uh, whether or not like we can live civilly, I suppose, when technology is gone. Or I guess, well, most philosophers like to talk about whether if government was gone we could live civilly, but in this case you're um, switching government out for technology. This is
yeah.
actually a real philosophical debate, and
Well,
it's
yeah.
called the
Well,
debate over.
like I said, the machine stops by Forrester in 1909.
Yeah,
When the machine stopped, technology is completely stripped from man and woman. Right? People just straight up dying. The entire culture shock of having absolutely nothing to sustain themselves, like, just makes them like short circuit, and they just straight up die.
yeah. Well, to be fair, like we live in a society, right? We live in a society.
Oh fuck.
Um, well, okay, so our capitalist society is interesting because it makes it so that when we do individual things, we are more than the sum of our parts, right? There's
Yeah.
division of labor. So I don't need to make any of my food because I exchange currency for the work that I do in a service job, let's say, for someone else, right?
Yeah.
As a result, I am completely reliant on this person that I have no idea who he is on the other side of the planet who makes fucking like wheat or some shit, right?
Yeah.
When that
Yeah.
when that idea collapses, when that idea of integration into a global economy, in your case, we would be talking about technology, the integration of technology and our reliance on it. When that notion collapses, suddenly you're left without the skills necessary to survive on your own, right?
Yeah.
And
Because you're
and
over dependent.
right, and the ability to self sustain is gone.
Yeah.
So the idea, the philosophical argument about realism, which is specifically this question actually that we're dealing with right here, the question of um, whether or not we revert into a violent state, or whether or not we can live primally, and what is better, right? Is
Yeah.
is not is really pertinent to today's society,
Yeah.
which is interesting because that means that your story could have a huge statement about today, like right now.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to get at because I've been reading a lot of science fiction novels.
Science fiction. Okay, you know what? We'll save that for a later time. Like I don't think it's right to start delving off into these weird ass angles. In fact, I probably shouldn't have brought up philosophy to begin with, but I really enjoy like discussing these sort of things. So anyway, I'd like to thank everyone again for listening. God bless, and we'll see y'all next time.